Hörmətli cənab Chikvaidze, ilk olaraq vurğulamaq istərdim ki, sizi burada görməyimizə çox şad olduq. Bu yaxınlarda Qlobal Bakı forumunda iştirak etdiniz. Zəhmət olmasa forumla bağlı təəssüratlarınızı bizimlə bölüşərdiniz.
Sure, thank you very much for such a warm introduction and warm words. I am practically in the same state of mind about being in Baku and about the Nizami Gencevi Global Forum. This is the 9th forum. So that in and of itself tells us that it's an important forum that's becoming more and more popular. And also the other thing that shows its popularity is the fact that we have quite a few sitting heads of government, state and heads of government taking part. Because I remember previous fora, also very important people, but most of them were former. Now, the Global Forum, Baku Global Forum, has become a brand, an important brand. So heads of state and government are now keen to participate. That is a reflection of the importance of Azerbaijan as a country, as a regional power, as a very important player, not only in the region but internationally. And it is also a reflection of the stature and the respect that the president of Azerbaijan, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, commands with his peers. He is respected because he is a great statesman. I'm not being overly complimentary. I think he is a great statesman. He has achieved things that many others have not achieved or cannot even begin to contemplate. And he is incredibly well-rounded. He's a statesman. He's got strategic vision. And that does not stop him from seeing micro situations and keeping everything in one on one radar screen. So all this works towards making Azerbaijan a very strong, important player, and we see this role from the various fora that are taking place in Azerbaijan. There was the humanitarian conference a few months ago. You look at all the cultural events, sports events. I mean, Baku is becoming one of the leading centers of economic, social, and political life, not only in the South Caucasus and in our greater region, but basically worldwide. It has ramifications everywhere.
Bildiyiniz kimi hazırda Qafqazda, Çeçenistanda, Qarabağda, Gürcüstanda və son vaxtlar Ukrayna və Özbəkistanda da münaqişələr baş qaldırıb. Sizcə, dünyadakı bu münaqişələr nə vaxt bitəcək? Ümumiyyətlə, bu münaqişələrin qarşısını necə almaq olar? Bu barədə fikirlərinizi öyrənmək istərdik.
That's a very important but also a very sad question, because we are well into the first quarter of the 21st century. Over 30 years has passed since the quote-unquote peaceful dissolution of the Soviet Union, and yet we are talking now about war in the heart of Europe. We're talking about all these conflicts that took place. So in historical terms, 30 years is nothing. 100 years from now, historians are going to look at this and they're not going to say, oh, this happened in 89 and 1991, and then many years later, there was war in... this will be all turned into a micro moment. However, we today are able to look at these 30 years and analyze them. And we see that these were 3 decades that were wasted. They were wasted because what needed to be done by way of putting in security structures that everybody would be happy with, instead of that, piecemeal measures were taken. And as a result, we have another split. It's not an ideological split anymore. The ideological split finished in 1991 with the demise of the Soviet Union. Now it's a geopolitical split. And there are many factors here. But what is clear is that the dissolution of the Soviet Union in a dynamic was not bloodless and peaceful. We have all the conflicts that you enumerated and more on the territory of the former Soviet Union. And that is a tragedy. It's an ongoing tragedy. It prevents most of the former Soviet republics from becoming prosperous, strong nations. It provides this political and historic baggage that keeps them from being full-fledged participants in various organizations where this or that country may wish to take part. And it takes a huge toll on the populations. Because whether it was good or bad, populations mixed in the Soviet times, they knew each other, they intermarried, they visited each other. Now, many countries are at odds with each other. It goes from being enmity to just not having good relations. And it takes a toll on human beings, on human contacts. It takes a toll on culture, it takes a toll on the economy, on everything. That is why this needs to be resolved. And it's gratifying when there are such leaders as your president who find ways of taking steps towards this, even though in your case this was a military operation, but it remained entirely within international law. Entirely. So it was military operation was strengthened by diplomatic savvy, by the ability to see the strategic side of things, and to remain within international law. As a result, you have managed to bring back the integrity of your country, the borders, and this is what the UN Charter of 1945, what the Helsinki Final Act of 1975, what the Paris Charter of a New Europe, for a New Europe of 1990, and what the Budapest Agreement of 1994 are all about. This is inviolability of borders, and it is the sovereignty of nations. So in that sense, Azerbaijan has strengthened all these provisions of all these documents. It was done militarily, and that doesn't make many observers happy, but it was done within the legal and international law provisions. And that's an incredible precedent. It's a geopolitical precedent. And it's a masterclass in how to do things within the law when the international law itself doesn't work or doesn't produce results. And your country waited for 30 years for the international mechanisms to produce results, and they didn't. I'm not calling for or suggesting that everybody go to war, because other countries have attempted something like that, and very close to me, but did not manage at all. And what we are seeing now in Ukraine is also, this is not the way to do things. There are other ways to do things. Yes. And Azerbaijan showed how it can be done and to remain within the law.
Bu ilin aprel ayında Bakıda humanitar mina təmizləmə və dayanıqlı inkişaf məqsədləri adlı beynəlxalq konfrans keçirilib. Konfransda BAM prezidenti Umud Mirzəyev və Sülhün Kökləri Təşkilatının rəhbəri Heydi Kün mina məsələsinin BMT-nin dayanıqlı inkişaf məqsədlərinin 18-ci maddəsinə salınması təşəbbüsü ilə çıxış ediblər. Bununla bağlı fikirlərinizi bilmək istərdik.
Mines are a huge problem in Azerbaijan, but they are a huge problem worldwide. Azerbaijan is not alone. Every place where there has been or there is a war or continuing military skirmishes has this problem. And the problem is not unique. It has various aspects, but in general, it is the same problem for everybody. And it's the same problem for the civilian population, because especially when military operations stop, civilian populations want to get back to their normal life. They want to start planting, they want to start, having livestock, and that's where the tragedies happen. I think it was important for Azerbaijan to host this conference. I think Dr. Mirzoyev and Heidi Kuhn have a very important initiative. While I doubt that the package of 17 goals will be formally reviewed and reevaluated and an 18th goal formally added, but I would say that this is an incredibly important initiative to continue to talk about this, because this will bring the issue to the attention of world leaders. Because if there's a campaign to create an 18th Sustainable Development Goal, this is going to get people's attention. They're going to say, what? What are they saying? Why? Because of mine action. You know, Princess Diana, the late Princess Diana, realized how important this was. And you remember her activities with regard to demining. She went to all these areas. Why? It wasn't for cheap popularity. It was because it is really a problem, and she cared about this. So anything that can be done by your organization, by Heidi Kuhn, whoever. And there are many organizations. There's the Geneva Demining Center, Humanitarian Demining Center in Geneva. We have the Mine Action Unit in the Department of Peacekeeping Operations at the United Nations. And your country is working closely with all these organizations and more in finding ways of technically demining this. And it has a technical aspect to it also, because I remember from my time working as in the 90s as the desk officer for Central Asia in Tajikistan after the war. There was a big mine problem. Why? Because there is, even when accurate maps are given to the other side, you have natural phenomena like flooding, mudslides, which is a very important thing. After a mudslide, all the mines move. You could have the original maps, but the mines are no longer there. So it's a very serious technical issue as well as a political issue. And I'm very supportive of what you're doing, and it's important to keep this on the front burner of member states, of governments. And I think you found a very good way to do this by calling for an 18th SDG.
Cənab Chikvaidze, siz uzun müddətdir ki, diplomat kimi fəaliyyət göstərirsiniz və Azərbaycan Respublikasının prezidenti İlham Əliyevlə də yaxın əlaqələriniz var. Hal-hazırda ümumilli liderimizin uğurlu siyasətini də məhz İlham Əliyev davam etdirir. Zəhmət olmasa bizimlə Heydər Əliyevlə bağlı xatirələrinizi bölüşün.
Thank you very much. You've touched on a subject that is very close to my heart. I wouldn't call it, acquaintanceship, because he was a very a big political figure, and I was just a regular UN staff member, but I had the great privilege of being part of this delegation in 1994, which was received by President Aliyev, Heydar Aliyev at the time. And, as a Soviet young diplomat in the beginning, and somebody who's been, as you said, in political life, I've always admired your former president back in Soviet times. I'll tell you more. When he was made full member of the Politburo of the Central Committee, there was a hope that maybe that will strengthen the Politburo, and because it was full of old bureaucrats. And he was a very intelligent, very technocratic, and strategically astute politician from a very important region. And we were all hopeful that maybe this would make the Politburo stronger and make the country stronger, which it did. But then, some changes happened. And so, and my father was foreign minister of Georgia in the beginning of the 90s, and he had, occasion to interact with President Aliyev. So this figure was, in our family, was always kind of, So for me as a young UN staff member, it was a great privilege to be, part of a delegation that was received by President Aliyev, and he shook hands with all of us. He remembered everybody's name, which was already stunning, because there were people from different countries and so on. And mine he remembered, I think, partly because of my father. And he gave us some very, very interesting political viewpoints and directions of how the UN could strengthen its work with countries, especially the new countries, former Soviet republics, especially those who had territorial disputes, who had gone through bloody war. And it was very interesting. And I'll tell you something else which you don't know about. I still have notes that I took in that meeting. I still have notes. And I have notes now that I took in the meeting yesterday with President Ilham Aliyev.
Yes.
So I will look at those notes and compare them. But it was a very, very important meeting, and there was a photo taken, various photos, and I asked then, he wasn't president yet, Ilham Aliyev, to ask his father to sign it for me. And he did. And I got back the photo, and it was signed on the back. Now I thought, the photo is signed on the back. I want the signature to be visible. The photo is on the other side. So what I did was, like a good James Bond, I very gently took off the back, and I went to a professional framing studio. I put the two photos together where President Aliyev was with his delegation and the UN delegation. I put it together, and I asked for the signed, dedicated version to be put. So it's come out very beautifully, and it has been on a very prominent display in my office since then. And the inscription says in Russian, "To David Chikvaidze, with best wishes for your noble work at the United Nations." 26 January 1995. I received it 1 month after. It was signed 1 month after, and the signature is G. Aliyev.
Yes.
And it's a historic piece, and I treasure it. I treasure it because I have many photos with presidents, with former secretaries of state, and so on. I am very, very, also happy to have them. But this one I treasure especially because I had great respect for this gentleman because of his work. So that's my little story.
BMT ECOSOC-un baş məşvərətçi statusuna malik olan BANF, 30 illik yubileyini qeyd etməyi planlaşdırır. BMT-nin Geneva ofisinin rəhbəri kimi sizin də öz təklif və tövsiyələrinizi eşitmək istərdik.
You have come a long way in 30 years, so I think my only recommendation would be continue what you're doing. You must be doing things well. But it's really important, the role of civil society nowadays. And the UN is doing its best to involve civil society as much as possible. The UN, I should clarify myself, because I always tell, especially student audiences, that when you hear the term UN did something well, UN did something wrong, you have to ask yourself, what is this person talking about? Which UN? Is it the UN system, which includes the funds, programs, specialized agencies, or is it one of the principal organs, the General Assembly, which has 193 members, everybody, the Parliament of Man? Or is it another principal organ, which is the Security Council? And are we talking about the 15 members of the Security Council? Or if it's a political deadlock and a political situation, are we talking about the 5 permanent members who have the veto power? Unless you clarify that to your own self, you don't really understand. When I say UN, I mean the UN Secretariat is doing its best to involve the civil society organizations. However, we can do that to an extent, but we cannot go beyond what the member states will authorize. I'll give you an example. The Human Rights Council has a docking mechanism with civil society, with human rights NGOs. It's a small role, but it's legally there. Human rights NGOs are registered for a given session. They participate, they can speak, but they speak at the end of the discussion, and they speak for 3 minutes, not more. And it's encouraged for them to speak in groups and so on. And they sit at the back of the conference room. And let's take another intergovernmental body, which is the Conference on Disarmament, which has been there since 1978. And in the last 22 years, 23, it hasn't managed to even vote a program of work, let alone get any negotiations done. And this organization, this intergovernmental body, doesn't have any linkage with NGOs. And why? Because the member states are against it. Those who make up the secretariat, which services it, wants to add. And my former director general, for example, came up with a creative idea to have an informal meeting between the members of the Conference on Disarmament, the 63 members, and civil society that works on disarmament matters. And everybody loved it, but still the member states, especially, especially the nuclear powers, they don't want NGOs to be taking part in issues that have to do with their national security matters. It's off limits. These are 2 different examples, but as time passes, more and more inroads are made by NGOs. The ICSOC Committee on NGOs is there to review the work of NGOs, to provide the ICSOC consultative status, which helps. There are 2 forms of status. There's the consultative status with ECOSOC, which is the Economic and Social Council, and there's also the consultative status with the Global Communications Department. This is mostly for public affairs, NGOs, and so on. So this is happening, but it needs to happen more. Why? Because the problems that the world is facing today are so complex that they cannot be really tackled by individual countries, even countries alone, even just governments. They need all of society. They need civil society writ large. not just an NGO that has a special focus. You need civil society, which includes private enterprise, academic institutions, educational institutions, various forms of local government, grassroots organizations. Everybody has to have a say. If they don't, it will continue to be, a la 17th, 18th century when potentates from different kingdoms and bishoprics and church groups, churches in medieval Europe or in 17th century Europe got together and made decisions for all the populations. This is no longer that time. And we need a new, this is why we keep saying in the UN, we need a new multilateralism, which is more connected, which is wider, has wider participation, and that can achieve better results that are needed by everybody.